So we've seen the first competitive game for Arne Slot and Liverpool, and it was an away match, obviously, against Ipswich, which they ended up winning 2-0. But there's a lot more in the underlying systems that Liverpool and Arne Slot are trying to play, and obviously, I think it's worth exploring Liverpool's 6 and therefore the 2 8s that Liverpool play. What's particularly interesting about it is that when you look at the shape of Liverpool, it's not exactly the shape that we probably would have expected Arne Slot to play, but that is almost purely based on average positions. And I was having an interesting chat with a friend of mine, Sam Maguire, who is a great Liverpool analyst. You can head over and find him on Twitter. He's got like the Patrick Bateman picture there, but he's an incredible Liverpool analyst, lays a lot of things out very simply about Liverpool, well worth a look, right? But here's Liverpool's average positions from the first half, here's Liverpool's average positions from the second half, and actually these players are kind of the same because that's their whole game average positions, but it's still going to tell you something. Obviously, Gravenberch was playing the deepest lying midfield player and therefore the 6. But alongside that, he was also playing alongside 2 players who play quite varied roles for Liverpool and enable their side in 2 different ways. Yes, Gravenberch was good, but I think he was the most visible of the players and the most active of those players, at least consistently in the midfield, who we can critique. That was mainly because I think, and this is where I bring in Sam's words and not necessarily mine, Gravenberch is the controller. Dominic Szoboszlai is the runner, and therefore Alexis Mac Allister is the retainer. And so when we're talking about this, we're not necessarily talking about formations, we're talking about roles within that, which A, Arne Slot wants to exploit, but B, the players are capable of playing, and why there is some self-sacrifice to a lot of the way that these players play. Let me just move that away. Talk about the midfield that we started. Now, obviously in build-up play, I think Szoboszlai slipped a little bit ahead of the other 2. Grav went to like one side and therefore Mac Allister went to the other. That gives the defence passing out a good few options. When Liverpool were, that was when Ipswich were quite pressy in the first half, shall we say, and they had 4 players pressing. They essentially matched Liverpool and then 2 in midfield. And what Liverpool wanted to do was move the ball through midfield as quick as possible. So when they put it to Gravenberch, very often he would get it back to Van Dijk or whoever it's passing to very quickly. So it would basically be a bounce pass. Or he would pass it out to one of the fullbacks very quickly as well, giving people like Trent a huge amount of space to pass into because, of course, we're catching Ipswich on the hop, but also giving him the chance to look ahead to Salah down one wing or the opposite wing to Luis Diaz. It basically opens up a lot of options for Liverpool and doesn't give the opposition much time to think. Now, I would say these 3 are the starting Liverpool 3 just purely out of preference as to what Liverpool currently need in midfield. Mac Allister's a really impressive but intelligent player on that side who can support, say, if we go to the average positions over here, either Tsimikas or Robertson out on that wing and also be really great coverage for Van Dijk, who then can basically remain a little bit deeper, but also give a lot of support to Luis Diaz on the other wing. And then on the other side, Szoboszlai in that runner role is much more likely to filter up and down there inside a Salah. Salah's going to be going on the overlap and we'll see a lot more. You could even see like a 20 assist season for someone like Dominic Szoboszlai because he's always going to be slipping in either Salah, Jota or Núñez immediately ahead of him, and that's very satisfying. But what it also meant is that in this double pivot in build-up, which is there, it instantly becomes those 2 a little bit further ahead and still someone holding there. And then, of course, like a Trent Alexander-Arnold joining him in midfield or kind of pushing him just a little bit further over this way. And that's very reminiscent of the Ajax days that he had, where he was much more part of like, there was a double pivot-y type system there where he could basically exploit the fact that he had another really strong player alongside him. And therefore, when he passed the ball, he knew he was passing on to someone good and he wasn't necessarily just getting rid of possession for the sake of getting rid of possession. Now, one thing I'd say about that is, this is very early Liverpool still. This is still slot 1.0 if we still want to talk about 1.0, 2.0 systems. And what people definitely aren't talking about, especially if they're only talking about the in-possession players in every game, which very often people are, is the fact that Liverpool lull you into a false sense of security. They obviously are controlling the possession, but it doesn't feel as intensive as some other teams intensively press you. There aren't those moments where you think, oh God, we're really in trouble here. And suddenly, when Liverpool have baited you to press them a little bit, when you've gone downfield, then I think there is going to be a moment where they go, okay, quickly move the ball through the midfield now. There's a little bounce pass. Salah's away, Diaz is away, someone's away. And they're transitioning, but not necessarily counter-attacking. It's like a controlling counter-attack where they've baited you into something. They've been jabbing all of that first half, working out where the weaknesses are, working out what offside traps and those kind of things you're going to play. And then suddenly, Slot and his players have come up with a solution to unlock you. Now, that's obviously if you play Liverpool on the front foot, if you play Liverpool on the back foot, and I think a few teams, I'll be interested to see what City do, I'll be interested to see what a couple of other guys do, are going to do to counter the way that Liverpool play, to almost rope-a-dope them, to possibly even just nullify what it is that Slot tries to achieve, and therefore put Liverpool on the back foot. Put a player like Gravenberch under pressure, McAllister under pressure, 𝐋𝐢𝐯𝐞𝐫𝐩𝐨𝐥'𝐬 or Konate under pressure, Trent not being able to play his expansive open game, those kind of things. And I think, obviously, we saw the counter-attack and people being worried about the fullbacks getting attacked, but I think overall there's a bigger thing here about Liverpool just falling into the season and, you know, like letting things settle a little bit, not necessarily always trying to go, okay, Slot's done another thing here, done another thing. There are going to be moments where the team don't get a training session, where they can't progress forward or they can't like somehow adapt and adapt and adapt. And they're going to have to go off what Slot has taught them and, almost to borrow a bit of a Kloppism, play with the gut rather than, you know, going out there and just specifically doing one prepared game plan. I think I'm going to be interested to see how that plays out for Liverpool, how the cards fall in that time. Because I think, you know, obviously it's very good at the moment that there are a lot of new tactics. We're not quite seeing how the players have been worked out yet by opposition managers. But there'll be a lot more tape to watch in a couple of weeks' time. There'll be a lot more people with notes and ideas as to how to beat Slot and Liverpool. And I think then is going to be a really interesting test. And we'll possibly see some people... I mean, you know, I don't know how Liverpool are going to play. Maybe they'll grow into that situation. But there are going to be challenges for Liverpool this year, and we've not necessarily seen those yet in any meaningful form, shall I say. We saw them a little bit against Ipswich, but not in a way where, A, the narrative can change because people, oh, Slot's going to have to get sacked or whatever, or that, you know, Liverpool have to cope in a game and see how that works. We go back here. This is only reflective of what Liverpool do in possession. Sure. Talk about how Liverpool need to change things. These are the 7 midfielders that we currently consider to be of the starter level. Of course, there are other players within there. You still want 𝐋𝐢𝐯𝐞𝐫𝐩𝐿, there's plenty of other players, but these are kind of starter level players in here. And when I say starter, I mean like not starter pick, but like they will be potentially starting for Liverpool. All these guys have played a decent amount of minutes and impressed the Liverpool fans. 𝐋𝐢𝐯𝐞𝐫𝐻 may also be included in that list at some point, but he's obviously currently listed in the under-21 squad, not really in that top-tier Liverpool, but he is still training with the top-tier Liverpool guys. It gives Liverpool so much adaptability. I'm going to get rid of those lines. We could bring 𝐻𝐢𝐝𝐿 in here and take Szoboszlai out, and suddenly you do have a very different style of player. I think it's fair to say 𝐻𝐻𝐲's attributes are at least a little bit better further forward, though obviously giving a bit of defensive cover is good, but I think he's definitely slightly more of a bit more of a connective player further up the field. That's not necessarily what Liverpool are always looking for. Szoboszlai, that runner type, obviously brings a lot of pace, obviously great at carrying the ball. I think Elliott's a bit more of a sharer, connective type player. That's not to take away from Szoboszlai, but you get what I'm saying. Endo will definitely be considered one of these guys who's a bit more here, but there is also the possibility that Endo could be considered as part of this double pivot like that and play there. There is also the possibility that Gravenberch may also play and change there, right? So then you've got I don't think that would ever really happen, but there's that. There's also the possibility, by the way, that you end up with something like that because, I mean, you know, McAllister is definitely capable of that, but I think that takes away from some of his attributes. He's definitely probably a bit better down the field as a 10 type if Gravenberch then goes there. And we know, I think what's important here is that Arne Slot loves, and I mean loves, to rotate that midfield around. So there is a bit more of a like rotating triangle at any one time. Really important to remember that. Really positive to remember that as well. Of course, there are some other players in here. I think Curtis Jones, I think we're still finding and retraining elements of what it is that he wants to play at Liverpool right now. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but I certainly think there are other elements that we can exploit him with. Would he go here? Would he go here? I'm not so sure that he's able to come in for Szoboszlai, but we'll find out. I think he's much more of that side of a player, giving a bit more support to your fullbacks and your winger out there. But again, it's just good to see the Gravenberch role being praised, because I think a lot of people are very down on any of Liverpool's defensive midfielders and more defensively minded midfielders. And again, we're looking at a controller, which again could possibly be a Curtis, but I'm not sure is the 190 heavy, really good at tackling style player. That is what Gravenberch is. I think he's probably a little bit close to this, but I think Dominik Szoboszlai is so elite in this position, it's very difficult to say that we've just got an interchangeable piece there. And then I think it's more or less the case that if you were to bring in Bajcetic, you could play one of those two, probably because they're a bit more holdy, though I would imagine it would be there. I don't see that in the immediate future. Just because I think players need time to progress. I think Slot definitely sees that there are a couple of players in here who need a bit of retraining, possibly don't retain some of the attributes that we would want. They're great adaptable midfielders, as we've seen in pre-season. Harvey Elliott was thriving in that position. Endo changed some of his attributes or showed some of the other attributes. And I think still as a Liverpool fan base, we're kind of working our way into a position where it's like, oh, now I see this guy a little bit more like a this, rather than how he was played in the Slot era. That's definitely worth acknowledging. But one thing I think is really worth acknowledging is this guy's still only 22. We saw him as an Ajax player, then we saw him as a reject from Bayern, and I think under the Klopp era, he was asked to play this halfway house type position, which a lot of people criticised him for because they didn't always see the best of his attributes there. Sure, in the first half, I think most of the Liverpool players were a little bit underwhelming, but in the second half, Liverpool definitely stepped up their play, and this interchangeable, adaptable midfield that Zubimendi possibly would have been for Liverpool, a couple of other players could possibly play that role, got the chance to pass the ball through it very quickly, make the best out of, and I'm going to move down here, this back line for Liverpool, and show that it's not just about, hey, the midfield is for creation, the defence is for defence, and the strikers are for striking. That system gets the most out of the roles and not necessarily the positions for Liverpool. I think it's roles over positions that we always need to be thinking about right now. You got Trent just there. Trent obviously slipping inside quite a lot. Oh, shall I bring Gravenberch down? Yeah, I might as well bring these three guys down here, there. And slipping in alongside of Gravenberch, but then also just being able to float the ball through to Szoboszlai, or possibly even a Salah there. We saw that on the weekend. I thought that was really satisfying. That was for the goal that Jota scored, where he slips the inside pass and they try and play offside, but they just can't. Again, getting the best out of someone like Mo Salah. Mo Salah is elite in that position and is very self-sacrificing, so that works really well for them. And then obviously you've also got someone like Andy Robertson. A lot of people said Andy Robertson struggled on the weekend. I think he was targeted because they know that Liverpool are going to put two players in here who have a lot of space. You're not going to be able to get those guys almost ever because there's always two passing options. And Van Dijk is obviously quite a press-resistant centre-back, not necessarily because he's amazing on the ball. I think he is incredible on the ball, but more because if you press him, then he's got a lot of options. And so it's just going to be not a worthless exercise pressing him, but it's not as paying, should we say, as to put a press on him or even a press on him. And obviously when we brought on Konate, I think he's incredibly aggressive. His passing range actually really showed really well on the weekend. I think we'll see Q-Ansah coach a little bit more into that role. And obviously Slot's got some confidence in him, like I'd say more than just some, a lot of confidence. He wouldn't have started the game if Slot didn't have some confidence in him. So there's a lot of positives to take away from this. I think what I would say is this is, again, the first version of this. Slot 2.0, maybe Gravenberch is going to carry the ball a little bit more. Maybe in other games we're going to see some, he's a retainer. He's also slightly a decoy in there. It's that, hey, I'll come deep. I can receive the ball. The ball's gone to Gravenberch or the ball has gone to Robertson. People forget, that's not reflected necessarily in stats. And they look at passing stats, all these kind of things. Obviously, being active on the ball is fantastic. And I think he is a fantastic, all of these guys are amazing on the ball, right? That's part of Slot's system. That's part of Klopp's system. But the fact that when you're trying to retain possession, you're trying to control a game, it's not just about what you do while you're on the ball. It's about the formation that you lay out outside of that. That is Alexis McAllister. He's intelligent in taking up great positions. Obviously, he's really good at reading the game and where the ball's going to go next, which I think is partly what we wanted out of Zubimendi. But also, we forget this guy is still only 22, but also really good at carrying the ball. And a lot of that was taken out of his game, or at least not shown in his game in the Klopp era, because he wasn't asked to carry it quite as much. Because that wasn't what we needed from him. And I think that's worth acknowledging at this point, is we know a lot of these players in the Klopp mould. And we can take some time to kind of retrain what it is that we think they're capable of. These are high-end technical players that Liverpool have got, and there's a reason that they're shopping at only the very top level this summer. It's not, we're not playing Football Manager where it's like just make a signing because it makes me feel good. It's about making a signing that's actually going to upgrade the team and not just, waste possession and not just waste money in the transfer market. And that's why Zubimendi was one of our top targets. Anyway, the real point here, I think, is there's Alexis McAllister there, Gravenberch there, and Szoboszlai there. Sure, that's a starting midfield. But next up, we're going to see the next iteration of that. People are going to work that out fairly quick, and Liverpool have got some big games coming up. We're going to see them try and cancel out this system quite a lot, especially against Erik ten Hag, especially against some of the more tactically astute managers. Bournemouth are really good at that. You saw Ipswich trying to do that, but they eventually just ran out of steam and ran out of motivation. Not they're not motivated, but obviously it's difficult when you've got Liverpool adapting. And this is the thing, Slot's halftime team talk changed so much. Obviously, post-match, he said, we can't talk about positions or possession or any of these things until we're actually just winning our duels. And sure, that's great. I agree with that. Unless you're doing the very basics, then there's a real issue there. But I really want to give a lot of credit to him. And I think what Liverpool have here is a very wide base of a midfield. And actually, there's a couple of players who wander forward and become more attacking, like in between those attackers up front. Bear those guys in mind. And you end up with Robertson or Trent dropping inside, giving support. And obviously Robertson has that overlapping run and is almost more like a winger which pushes Diaz inside. And you saw that when Gakpo came on. Gakpo was a bit more facilitative, almost a left wing come left 10. And then that changed a bit more of what McAllister was doing and allowed him to go a bit more centrally. All of these subs have a real push-on effect in the Liverpool team. And I'd really love to know what you guys think about the adaptable system. I think a lot of people are getting stuck on do we have a 6? Do we have a right back? Bradley, by the way, another facilitative player out there. I loved what happened when he came on. He's taken many more runs out there rather than coming inside and passing there. Again, completely changes the line of attack for Liverpool. So there's a lot of options out there. I just want to know what it is that you guys think is possible for this Liverpool team. Whether, if we do make another signing, what that means for a McAllister, a Gravenberch, or a Szoboszlai. Because obviously, I think it's clear when we wanted Zubimendi that we needed a profile of player like that. And of course, Slot is an incredible coach, so we'll see what happens with those three in the time he gets to spend with them, all those kind of things. But I think it does mean we need maybe one more midfielder in there, but he's got to be a very specific profile. Maybe one more defender in there, Andy Robertson's side, but he's got to be a very specific profile. And I think that's what the rest of the transfer window is going to show us here. How worried are Liverpool about these positions? Obviously not overly, because they've stuck with a lot of their squad and they've not felt the need to go out there and get rid and change. Not that's necessarily always the option, but I think what we're seeing here is slot ball is only in its first era at Liverpool, and it will only evolve and change. And I think we're still yet to see Liverpool really challenged. I think that's the thing here. This week, I'm going to make a video about this later in the day, but you'll see Liverpool challenged in the next couple of weeks, and we'll see whether the air changes and how wildly people swing around in this time based on their rudimentary, quite basic analysis, because they haven't watched any of the pre-season. They haven't assessed Liverpool's positions or any of those things. And I think broadly you're going to see people swing around in their opinions, should we say, of Liverpool and this side, because 1 minute the narrative is they need a signing, 1 minute the narrative is that Klopp's lost and therefore it must be like when Sir Alex left, all these kind of things. Broadly, you can see the players are reinvigorated and are really enjoying it. And I'll be doing a video later in the week about this guy's role, and I don't have Mo Salah up here, but Mo Salah's role as well, and how that can only expand. Looking forward to seeing what you guys have to say in the comments below, and I'll chat to you again in a little while. If you haven't already hit subscribe, do it. There's Patreon down there. Starting up membership this week. Really appreciate your time. Have a good one. Bye.